Thank you all so much for coming tonight. This panel discussion is really about these ladies and how they're contributing to amazing, innovative industries in the Northwest. They're, inventing new technologies, creating new products, all kinds of innovations that are going on right in our own backyards. We wanted to highlight them, showcase some of the great stuff that we're doing and that is going on all the time, just below, out of the scenes. We wanted to bring that to light today. And I'm so excited to have you all here. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to now introduce Patricia. She's the co-inventor of Enbrel. She holds over 40 patents in the US. She's also the Vice President of Commercialization at Life Science Washington, and she'll take it from here. So thank you all, and let's give everyone a round of applause.
Thank you again for the invitation to moderate, and it's really exciting to see a lot of people here. I do want to mention a few things in addition to what Ryan said. I am the VP of Commercialization at Life Science Washington, and it's a little bit different than maybe you think it is. I don't have a lab or anything like that, and I'm not commercializing one particular product or anything. I work with entrepreneurs all over the state to help them understand what is the next step that they might have to take with creating a company or getting a technology through a proof of concept. So it's mentoring people and companies to try and take the next steps and build our ecosystem back. So that's pretty much what I do, which is great fun, and it's just wonderful to actually meet a number of women that have been doing things just like that. So what I would actually like to do is have them introduce themselves. And to start with, I'd like to introduce Caitlin and ask Caitlin to talk a little bit about herself.
I would, but I'm Kirsten.
You're Kirsten. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry about that. I saw it. I don't know if I need my glasses. sorry, Kirsten.
So no, I'm
Caitlin. Let me start with Caitlin.
Sure. People that are
sorry.
I'm Caitlin.
Sorry, Caitlin.
So I am leading the R&D tool development team at Lumen Bioscience, where we are pioneering the use of spirulina cyanobacteria as a bioproduction platform for high-value molecules in food and cosmetics and
a little louder.
Medicine. Okay, one more time. We're pioneering the use of spirulina as a bioproduction platform for high-value molecules in food and cosmetics and medicine.
Okay, great. You want to talk a little bit about your background?
Sure. My background is in genetics and molecular and cell biology. Prior to joining Lumen, I was at the University of Washington.
Louder.
Where I completed my PhD and MBA.
Okay, cool. Second, I'd like to go to Kirsten. Not intentionally number two, that's just the way that it was organized, so it's by company.
It's all good. So I'm Kirsten Gaba, and I'm a clinical research nurse. Have started a cannabis research company with my partner, Jessica Tang, called VertiBio. And an offshoot of that company is called Basic Jane. And that is a company that we started this last February, and it is topical analgesics. And so it was originally designed and formulated for my 80-year-old mother, who has arthritis in her knees and in her hands and degenerative discs in her back. And she said, I can't take NSAIDs anymore. My doctor said I have poor renal function. I said, don't you worry, Mom, I got your back, literally. So a couple of years of small clinical trials, and we've just opened our door.
And Jessica.
So my name is Jessica Tanny. I think that I have had a somewhat traditional, untraditional biotech background. I did about 15 years working for other people and mostly genomic tools and molecular diagnostic companies. And then I left and ended up starting a consulting company. Through that consulting company, founded a couple other companies that were acquired. And somehow along the way, I found myself fairly sick. I had to bide some time between a clinical trial and essentially death. I was about 40 pounds less than I am now, and somebody said, maybe you should try a little marijuana. Turns out it was helpful. But the flip side of it is that from my biotech background, I realized that it was more of a system of hope than a medical system. And I thought, you know, this is not a difficult question. This is just an ag bio play. So let's figure out how we use the tools that we have to figure out what we can pull out of cannabis for clinical utility. And so that is how I ended up doing what I never thought I would be doing, which is researching cannabis from a fairly, I would say, traditional biotech background.
Cool. Thank you. Sarah?
Hi guys, I'm Sarah. I currently work at Black Raven Brewing Company out in Redmond. I've been working for 3 different breweries now for the last 9 years. I originally started out going to culinary school. I wanted to be a cook, and then the beer world decided that it wanted something else for me. So yeah, right? Woo, woo, woo. So here I am now.
And Robin.
Hi, I'm Robin Schumacher. I'm a brewer and co-owner at Stoop Brewing. We've been around for about 4 years now. My background, I was a high school biology teacher for 13 years, and a natural transition is to make alcohol after that. That's where I am now.
Well, I'm not going to ask each of the individual questions, but I kind of want to have a dialogue going between us and bouncing things off of each other. So I guess to start with, how do we all get here is kind of the basic question. Or how do all the seemingly disparate kinds of things that you all do relate to each other? Who wants to chime in?
I can a little bit. One of the things I don't think people realize is that hops and cannabis are genomic cousins. They both are diploid genomes, 20 chromosomes, very similar from a genomic structure. So I think that it's a natural iteration to have kind of cannabis and hops on a panel together, and then you need bugs, maybe not cyanobacteria, but bugs that make beer. So
Talk about that. Cyanobacteria phototropic, so we're not growing it in fermentators, but along the lines of fun, food, and cosmetics, our lead product is a blue pigment called phycocyanin, and so perhaps there's some opportunity for a blue Seahawks Sounders themed beer over
Interesting. I like that again.
Because they both have healing properties.
I do have to say that one of the first questions I asked is whether there's any marijuana brownies, but I don't think that quite relates. But that was one of the first questions was asked to me. Any other comments from you guys? No? Okay, all right. So there's a genetic link there. But let's get more into how you got here. What kind of challenges did you guys all have? I'd actually kind of like to hear from all of you, or have the audience hear from all of you, because I think that each of your experiences are probably a little bit different.
I'll start since I have this. When I left teaching, that was a hard decision, but an easy decision at the same time. Teaching is the hardest job anyone will ever do, I'll just say that right now. So 13 years, I felt like I had done what I could without sacrificing too much of my mental health, because it is a difficult, important profession. But when I quit teaching, I didn't really have a set plan, and Carrie knows, because Carrie actually is in the science community. When you hand out your resume after 13 years of teaching, people don't necessarily see the translatable skills there. So it was a little bit depressing. I mean, I knew I had skills, but when someone sees that, they wouldn't necessarily hire me. So I was looking in the industry that you guys are all in. I wasn't excited about it. It wasn't my passion. Like, lab work was not my passion. And it was also, again, depressing because I wasn't even being hired for those like entry-level jobs. So I kind of hit a point where it was, I have to make my own pathway. And so I knew I wanted to get in the beer industry eventually, so I just started pushing myself on the industry. I just made myself so available that people thought I was part of the industry way before I was. So that was the biggest challenge for me, is like persevering through that feeling, well, no one's hiring me, so I'll just create my own pathway.
I don't know if you want to do it in order, however you want to
No, mine's pretty quick. I didn't really, mine's a little bit different. I didn't quite go through the same type style. Mine was a little bit, like, I almost want to say easier. I was working at a restaurant that was also a brewery while I was going to culinary school. And so during that, like, I started volunteering for for beer festivals and things along those lines, and I really got myself out there. And the company that I worked for actually saw an opportunity to like bring in somebody green that they could teach their way, as opposed to hiring somebody that's like set in their ways. So I kind of got lucky with that. I would say one of the bigger struggles I had was when I went to work for Rock Bottom, which is a corporate brewery. And when I first got there, it was so gung-ho, and I was the brewmaster. It was my brewery. I got to run it the way I wanted to run it. I got to make the decisions that I wanted to make, and I was so happy to be there. And about a year and a half into it, I realized that not only like the employees that worked for me, but the guests and the people that came in, they didn't even really realize that it was a brewery. That it apparently like big metal machinery meant nothing, but I realized that I was putting all my heart and soul into something that very few people cared about, and that was a really big struggle for me. And that's what made me change my mind and leave and go to Rock Bottom, where I'm super duper.
Leave Rock Bottom.
Leave Rock Bottom and go to Black Raven. It's been 3 years and I still say Rock Bottom, but I've been happier ever since.
There's an R and a B in there.
There's SBR or RB, so. Oh, I sent it.
No, that's okay.
I certainly didn't have it figured out ahead of time. I couldn't foresee myself ending up where I am now. I started in a research lab when I was in college and was fascinated by biology. And I think looking back on my path, I'd say a big part of it was just pursuing paths that interest me, and regardless of whether that was a kind of standard path or not, and being open to possibility. So after graduating from college, I was looking for ways to apply biology. I moved to Washington, D.C., and did some science policy internships with the U.S. Senate and at AAAS. And that gave me just kind of this big picture view of what was going on in science and how science was interacting with the rest of the world. And during that time, I became really interested in business and building companies because I saw the impacts that companies were having. And so when I went back to grad school, that's when I decided that in addition to doing my PhD work in genetics, I would go to business school. And as part of my dissertation work there, where I became interested in how genetic variation impacts protein production processes, started thinking along the lines of bioproduction platforms. And when I saw the opportunity at Lumen Bioscience, I was ready and open to that possibility. It's probably worth noting that I saw the job posting for Lumen, and at that time, it was a startup. I think a lot of people would have just kind of dismissed it as not knowing what it was, and there wasn't any information about the company, but I sent them a quick note and asked them if they wanted to grab coffee. And I didn't apply for the job that was posted. I just kind of convinced them why I should be part of the team.
So I think that my career is pretty much dumb luck, to tell you the truth. When I was in college, when I was a freshman, I liked the beer too much. And I had a 9 a.m. karate class. And I got about halfway through the semester and I realized I was going to flunk karate. Like, full on flunk it. Like, I hadn't shown up. I didn't know where it was at. I went to my advisor and I said, I gotta get out of karate. And he said, fine, but you gotta realize you're gonna be 14 credits and that means you're not gonna be a full-time student. And your letter is going to your parents and you're not gonna have health insurance. This is like, years ago. And I thought, oh, that's not gonna be pretty. He said, but if you can convince somebody to let you work in your lab, then you can get a credit for lab and you can stay a student. And so I took his list. I had no idea what I was doing, and I walked into the lab next door to his. And I said, will you hire me? And the woman was running out, and she said, well, do you know what I do? And I said, well, no, but my dad's gonna kill me if I'm not a full-time student. And she just kind of looked at me and she said, okay, show up tomorrow and you can learn to wash dishes. So I got in her lab. And
Where did you go to school?
Washington State. Okay. There's a lot of beer in Washington State, the rumor is. I don't know, I maybe consumed a little. And then I ended up getting an undergrad at Howard Hughes. And I got to the end and realized I didn't have a job and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then Howard Hughes said, if you want to keep going, we'll keep paying. And so, it was a lot of dumb luck. I graduated and it was the late 90s Human Genome Project, got in a startup, just a lot of dumb luck. And so I think that there were definitely challenges along the way, but I think that the most challenges I've had is probably in the last 4 years, which I probably could have used Caitlin quite a bit for, and that was when we decided we wanted to do cannabis research. The first thing we did was we went to the state and we said, we're having difficulty filling out this 502 paperwork to be a grower because we don't want to sell marijuana. And they said, well, what do you want to do? And we said, we want to research it. And they said, that sounds awesome, but it's against the law. Mm-hmm. And we said, well, what about health and human safety? And they said, it's important, but it's against the law. And so they said, you got to go and change the law. And I was really bad at civics as well. I think I maybe cranked through that class as well. And so they said, I said, what do I need to do? And they said, well, you got to call a senator. And so they were very nice, and they gave me the name of 2 senators, Jeannie Cole Wells and Ann Rivers, and they were both very, very helpful when I called and said, we want to do research, how do we do it, how do we get through the legislative process? And we have since gotten 3 bills passed. We've had the only unanimous cannabis bills that have passed that House and the Senate. But it was a real struggle to realize that, we can sell recreational marijuana to anyone over the age of 21, but it is illegal for us to study it. And so I think that was the biggest challenge, is knowing what we wanted to do from a science perspective. And granted, we were able to do a lot of genomic research and some things within the bounds of the law, but it was very frustrating, I think, from more a administrative perspective, I would say, than anything else.
So, and speaking of dumb luck, so I knew Jessica on a personal level before starting our business, and she was sick, and I'm a nurse, and so
she's a good friend.
So the caregiving just kind of came in, and she was like, we need to research this. I'm like, of course we do. Mm-hmm. This totally makes sense. We need to go out and start doing some clinical trials. My research background, I was here at the UW for a decade, and before that I was doing some contract research, and I said, it makes sense to me. And then we hit this roadblock, and it was really interesting. We went and met with the ACLU attorney who actually wrote I-502. And Allison said, we sat down and we talked with her, we introduced ourselves, and she's like, research. She goes, didn't even cross my mind to put that in I-502.
She also said she didn't get passed.
Well, that's right. She said we didn't think it was going to pass, and truly, we were really wanting to protect youth that were getting caught with marijuana and 3-structure out. So she's like, that was our focus. We didn't think it was going to pass, so research was not even on our radar. So we've had quite the journey of learning, going back and forth to Olympia and learning how to write bills and learning how to do the political bit and working in a world, excuse me, it is really, really, really different.
So you found ways around and through the various communities to work with.
We have, and we've also been on the outskirts. I mean, when we started, we were meeting with some women who were strongly in the marijuana business, and they had a network, and we were asked not to join them because we were too sciencey. We weren't, earthy enough. Yeah. So.
Well, how about the rest of you? Did you find that you were embraced by the community to come into it? I mean, I hear some positives, maybe some negatives.
Surprisingly enough, being in like a very male-driven industry, I actually haven't really had any struggles with like men accepting me into the brewing industry. Once a male knows what I do, they actually think it's cool. I've had a lot of people help me out in different positions. I think we were actually talking about this last time we got together. I feel like the one struggle that we find is we do a lot of like beer festivals or a lot of events where we're serving beer, and we will get like men that come up to us and like ask for a brewer. Like, can I speak to a brewer? And just like completely bypass us. So there has been several situations where like I just get bypassed altogether, and people don't even think that I'm capable of being a brewer. But once I like kind of inform them, no one's like a jerk about it. So I mean, in all reality, like I've been pretty embraced in the industry. I haven't had too many of the struggles with that along that lines.
And it's not just men, too. I mean, it can be, it can
Yeah.
be women, too.
Yes, absolutely. We
Yeah.
get a lot of people
Yeah.
that just think that we're just a tap room face as opposed to
Yeah.
capable of actually,
There's a pretty stereotypical view of what a brewer looks like, and you can probably imagine
beer belly.
beards, and it's pretty true. Except for us. But it is kind of from a consumer perspective. The beer community is very close and very collaborative, and that's part of the reason I wanted to get into the industry.
Women used to make beer, you know?
Yeah.
Like they were the original.
The original brewers were women. So yeah, it's from the consumer standpoint, just letting people know that there are other people besides bearded men that make beer. So it's not, it's more just lack of knowledge rather than people thinking we can't do it.
Okay.
Yes.
So the next one is, so that was sort of the business community. What about the consumer community? Were they accepting of you? I would assume maybe, but maybe not.
Well, the brewery that I currently work for, actually every brewery that I've worked for has already been established. So I think they already had their like community based. So I haven't really experienced too much on like trying to open your own place or trying to like build a community with somebody. You probably do though.
We're a fairly female-focused brand, so it hasn't really been a huge step for us, I would say. I think.
Well, I mean, didn't you help start up Stoop?
Yeah, 2 of the 3 owners of Stoop are women, so we, I wouldn't say that it was difficult from a female perspective, but it was more difficult whenever you're trying to create a new brand in a market where people know everybody. We came out of nowhere. We didn't have an established brewer that everyone knew, so we had to create our brand, and we actually approached it from a very science-driven perspective because I have a biology background. Brad is a chemist. He was a chemist, so our focus was to create consistent quality beer from the very beginning. Because sometimes in the beer industry, people give people a little bit of leeway at first, but we didn't want off-flavored beers to start out with. We wanted them maybe they weren't your favorite beer, but you knew they were a good quality beer.
And we're pre-revenue and
Yeah. Yeah.
So did you each have mentors that helped you decide to go in these paths, or was it more that you just decided to do it on your own? Because I've always found that I didn't have a mentor, so my own personal experience, and so I like to give back by helping others. But a lot of people seem to have found mentors, and how did you find one? How did you grow with that person if you did?
I can address, one of the people that really helped me was actually when I was at Affymetrics. We had a female CEO, Sue Siegel. And when I left Affy, I had been commuting for about 6 years down to the Bay Area. And it got really old. And Affy went through its ups and downs. And it turned out at the time that I wanted to leave, things weren't happy for me at Affy. So I decided, I'm gonna leave Affy. And I left without really knowing what I wanted to do. And I called her up and she said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I have no idea what I want to do, Sue. Like, I couldn't tell you. Steve, who was the CEO, had given me a sabbatical, so I had a little bit of time to go and figure out what I wanted to do. He was very nice that way. And Sue said, well, maybe you should try consulting and I'll give you a project. And long story short, for 5 years, I did a lot of consulting work, and I would have never done it had she not just said, here's the consulting project, go and try it. And so I think there was several people along the road, but she was definitely one that was, while I was at Affy, was very helpful, and then when I left was definitely a force to be reckoned with. Sue's all of about 4 feet 5 inches. I don't know. She'd probably kill me. Maybe she's a little taller, but she's a force to be reckoned with. And I think that for me, I would have never done the consulting and never would have gotten any startup experience that I got, and founding the startups out of the consulting, and wouldn't be here now had I not kind of had the push to go and do something on my own.
Anybody else?
So I originally started working in Silver City in like the front of the house while I was going to culinary school. And that's how I kind of realized I started enjoying craft beer. And like they're the kind of place that like before you even get hired, you have to take a test that you can like tell your tables that you know how the beer process goes. So just being a server or a host, like I had to understand the process. And so as I started learning that, like I kind of realized that I actually thought it was pretty cool. And so like that's when I started volunteering, and that's when I started getting involved in the brewery however I could, and I kind of like pushed myself in there for fun. But what I found out was that I really, really enjoyed it, but for being a fresh 21, 22-year-old, I wasn't fully taking it seriously, not as seriously as I should have. And I had a couple of bosses that worked there that really, truly pushed me. They saw the potential in me, and they kind of gave me that, I would almost say like dad talk. Just like, we see this potential in you, we just need you to, show up to work on time. That would be great. So I definitely give a lot of credit to the guys that I worked with at Silver City, because, they could have thrown me to the curb a couple times, and they chose to stick with me and gave me the opportunity to like really blossom to get where I am today.
It's nice for me to hear that, because I live in Tulsa. So I get out of Silver City all the time. So
mentors have been very important, I'd say, throughout my career, just for the encouragement, but also as a sounding board for when like wrestling with a decision or just needing some information, like how does this usually work, and I think it's really important for us as women especially to be really intentional about building those networks and having a broad set of vendors, both men and women.
So I think we have a few minutes left, and so I would like to actually, before we open it up and actually let you guys ask some questions. And so one of the things I want to ask you guys is, would you do it again?
Take the same route?
Whatever route, but would you like to end up in the same place that you are now?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. I definitely had some bumpy roads along the way. I worked at a few places that I had to make some like true life decisions. This is how I want to do it. But no doubt in my mind, like, I mean, I left culinary school to be a brewer. I didn't even bother finishing, you know, and granted, I do kind of look back and wish I would have, just to say that I accomplished that thing. But yeah, I left it because I knew I found my true career.
Yeah, I'm really happy where I'm at. Yeah. It's immediate gratification. Like teaching, I know I'm doing something important, but I make beer and someone drinks it, I see. It's pretty fun.
Yes, I feel so lucky to be where I am at. The cutting edge of science, doing something that I think is really fun and exciting, and being part of building a company. And kind of lost my train of thought.
You do it again.
So excited. Yes! Yeah, I think it helps too when times get tough to really be able to step back and have some perspective on this time and place, being, you know, in Seattle at this time, and that gratitude, you know, provides a lot of energy and purpose.
I would say definitely. That doesn't mean that every day I don't question my decisions or, you know, think, have I lost my mind? You know, I research cannabis. But the flip side of it is I would 100% do it again.
Yeah, it's getting too close over there.
We get excited.
You know, so it's, I grew up with going to the mentor. I grew up with parents that had their own business. And so watching them work, watching them, you know, 7 days a week, and it comes home with you and you have dinner and then you still continue to talk, I was like, wow, that's my world now. I mean, but it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing and it's gratifying, and to watch the people that were able to help with even just the topical analgesics, who are, you know, reordering, and these little ladies who call me and they're like, my credit card number changed, here it is, I'm gonna leave it on your voicemail. I'm like, no. Why would I want to order it online when I can talk to you on the phone? Oh, that's awesome. You know, it's, when are you gonna make it in larger containers? Soon. You know, I mean, but it's rewarding. I mean, it is, you know, it's a job of passion.
So last question, what would each of you give as a piece of advice to the people in the audience to go where they want to go, or you know, what piece would you like to impart them with?
You don't try, you don't know. And here's the deal: if you have a friend that comes to you and goes, "I've got this idea," you know what? Walk down that path and see where it takes you.
So I have to say that I got this question when I was on a panel about 2 years ago, and I kind of dodged it. And a friend afterwards told me, you know, you dodged the question, and called me out. And so I struggle with, you know, whether or not I'm honest on this question. And so I think I'll be honest, and I might get some pushback today. But I think that what I would say is believe in yourself as much as other people believe in you. And I think that I was very lucky at a young age. And I'm going to point out that this was not an Affymetrix, because I've used their name, and this is not this company. But I was very young, and I had a boss ask me to do something that I felt was illegal. And I told them no. And I will, 20 years later, tell you what the guy said. He said, that is the problem with women. You spend 60% of your time in the workforce and never learn to play by the rules. And I listened to him, and I hung up. And I was pissed. But I didn't do anything. And my dad called about 5 minutes later. And he said, I told him the story. And his response to me was, I have never been more disappointed in you. And I said, what do you mean? Like, did you hear what he said? And he said, I thought I raised a daughter that would have told him to go to hell. But he's my boss. And he said, no, but I thought I raised a daughter that would have been unemployed by the end of that discussion. And I got off the phone and I thought about it and I thought, you know, why wasn't I? Kind of thing. And so I handled the situation. I was very, the thing that I feared the most at that time was actually not having a job. I was young, I had a mortgage, I didn't have much. And I ended up quitting, which we can argue about whether that was the right thing, but for me it was very rewarding because I got another job and I realized that the worst thing that could happen was I would get fired in a situation. And I have to tell you, every time, I wish I could tell you that similar situation didn't happen again, but I think that they do. And every time that something like that has happened to me since then, I have handled it in a way that I would be proud to tell my dad. So I think that when you say believe in yourself the way that other people believe in you, not the way that you believe in you. And so that's the advice that I would pass on.
Yeah, your vision doesn't have to be a complete vision. Yeah. Start moving in the direction and be brave. And you might have to tell some people to go to hell.
I would say a common theme here has been perseverance. I actually have a little fortune cookie, whatever their fortune, next to my computer, and I actually can't remember the quote, but it has the word perseverance in it. I look at it all the time because I was a teacher for a long time. It was a very safe profession. You got health care, you had a job, you signed a contract, went back every year. And I don't regret 1 second of doing that, but that kind of held me in a place for a long time. And then once I quit, I was pushing 40. So I had to move pretty quickly, and I learned really quickly, play up your qualities, even if it's uncomfortable, because those qualities are there, and be persistent. I just asked and asked and asked throughout the community if I could be a part of it. And it's kind of like dating. You get rejected a lot, but then there's that one person that's like, I believe in you, and then they help you get to where you need to be. So keep asking.
I don't know if what I have to say is something you guys would actually want to follow and do.
They can temper it themselves.
Yeah, my path went a little bit different. Like, I chose not to finish school. I was in the middle of going to school. I had a degree ahead of me, and then all of a sudden this path came my way, and it wasn't even a promising path. I was cleaning kegs in the freezing cold, Silver City was just starting to get on their feet and switch over from being in this tiny little brewery attached to the restaurant to this big warehouse where now they're making massive amounts of beer, and I loved culinary school. I loved everything about it, but I literally just gave it up just to go wash kegs because I felt like there was this thing inside of me that just this is where you need to go. It's going to be dirty and gritty and wet and cold and awful for months. But somehow I got this amazing experience out of it. Like a family, almost, I still go see them all the time. I just left yesterday. They took me under their wing and they trained me and they taught me everything that I know. And because of that, I have medals, and I'm a lead, and I'm in charge of people. I don't want to say people, but I'm in charge.
You get to be a leader.
I get to be a leader. Thank you for putting that in the right way. I don't know. I went from, having something, a piece of paper that should get me a job anywhere, to throwing that piece of paper in the garbage and taking on just this completely unpredictable job. And I did it because I just felt this thing inside me that it was the right thing to do. And now I'm exactly where I want to be.
So what I think I hear all of you saying is follow your passion.
Pretty much.
As a number one, yeah? And persistence pays off. So from my own experience, when I was a technician, I dropped out of college and I worked in a lab for a little while. It was a food chemistry lab. There was there was this picture, and it had a picture of a strawberry growing out of asphalt. And underneath it said persistence pays off. And that's been my motto. So it's the same sort of thing. You got to be a little hard-headed and keep going, but you got to follow your passion. If you don't follow your passion, you're not going to get to where you want to go. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to the audience to ask some questions of the group.
You want to take the other one? Okay.
I'm really curious about your clinical trials. Could you talk a little bit more about that and how, it sounds like you did a lot of lobbying to make it work in the state senate, but how were you impacted by federal laws?
So we separate cannabis into below 0.3% and above 0.3%. And so below 0.3% is hemp products. Above 0.3% is the drug phenotype or marijuana. It is impossible to do an IND pretty much under the marijuana phenotype. Our topical products are pretty nice because they fall under the 1984 guidance of the FDA for topical products. So it's actually the menthol we make the claims off of, not the cannabis itself. So the active ingredient is menthol within those. And so that made it a pretty simple blinded study. And since it's a topical product, it's low level. We actually worked quite a bit with LSDF on trying to figure out a creative way for oral or marijuana products to do clinical testing. The good news is I think GW Pharma is paving the way. They're doing an athletics trial, which is an extract of cannabis for epilepsy kids. I was just at Stanford on Monday talking and the trial was presented. I think that they are paving the way for how we can do IND submissions in the future. From a state level, we've set up the regulations so that it doesn't have to fall under for clinical research outside of the state for an IND. So it would have to fall under internal state IRB type approval. But for the drug phenotype, federal IND submission is pretty much impossible, which is what we've done. How we've bypassed it is kind of going off the 1984 guidance on topical products and not doing it off of THC or anything like that. I don't know if that answers.
That's super helpful. Any other questions?
Well, I have a question. Who made the beer?
Actually, me and wave your hand, Denise. I just want to bring this up really quick. We do what's called a Pro-Am beer every year. It's where home brewers take their beer and they bring it into a competition. And then as brewers go try their beers, and we pick from the beer, and then we invite that brewer into the brewery, and we take their small batch of beer and put it on a large scale, and we turn it into, well, I mean, we served it at the tap room, we served it a couple different places, but we also turned it in the Washington Beer Awards and got silver medal. So that's why it tastes so good. Because there's chick love in it.
What was the scariest thing that you've ever overcome, and how did you deal with that?
Is that for everyone,
Yeah.
or just checking?
I can say that pretty easily. For me, it was my health. I mean, quite honestly, that was, I think, if you face that, you kind of like, everything else seems kind of trivial, funding or, a bad day at the office. It's still bad, but you kind of put things in perspective. So I would say that's for me. Probably
probably not the scariest thing, but one of the things that I had to overcome, not overcome, but something that I face is that I've had a career. I've had my family, and I was, now I'm, in my 50s, starting a brand new life. And that, as I watch my husband, scaling down and my son going off, I'm like, wow. It's a different world than being, than being 20s and 30s and going. I've done that. Now we're reamping it. So it's a total different, energy level.
No thoughts of retirement for you.
Scariest thing. I don't know if it's the scariest, but I finished up my grad school and didn't have a job. Postdoc was the obvious kind of next step, but decided just to kind of walk out and see what happened. So spent a number of months kind of looking for the right thing, and that was scary.
Yeah, I think giving up a career that is a steady paycheck is pretty frightening. Although I waited long enough that I wasn't scared, I was just ready to do it. But I was earlier when I had contemplated it. But I got the support of my family, and then climbing on ladders to dry hot beers is scary because I'm afraid of heights.
We finally bought movable stairs for that. I totally agree. Scariest moment for me was not getting into the brewing industry. I was like in the clouds when I found out that I was getting the opportunity. But I was with Silver City for so long, and they had taught me everything, and I just kind of felt like under Mama's wing at Silver City. And then this job opportunity came up to go to Rock Bottom, where I was going to be the brew master. Like, not just that, the only brewer. Like, I didn't even get anyone to blame a mistake on if I wanted to. Everything was up to me. And so not only that, but I thought I had learned so much at Silver City, but I didn't learn the part where, like, if something breaks down, like, who do you call? Like, anything along those lines. So I would say, like, my first month of working with Rock Bottom scared the shit out of me.
Other questions? Yeah?
Okay. How did you raise funding for your project? Can you talk about how you began your...
Go that way. Yeah, I didn't do anything.
So I've raised now 3 times. The prior 2 were traditional biotech, so it was VC route, which is difficult, but there's a Rolodex of people that you call. That Rolodex of people is very different when you use the word cannabis, because it's Schedule 1. So the
Small
more,
Rolodex.
the more David Howes in the world kind of don't answer the phone. But we raised, I would say, more traditional. Quite honestly, 80% of the people that are in us are biotech people, but it was more, I would say, along the lines of angel round than a traditional VC raise. And we were also self-funded for the first 2.5 years. So we are just about ready to close out our second round, and it is, for the most part, the majority of it is our investors coming back in. So I would say, I don't know if that answers.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you.
I haven't been directly involved in the process, but I would say from my observation, there's an element of being totally shameless. Like.
I think we just got lucky and everybody likes beer.
We did a mixture, small business loans, which is pretty difficult to get in the beer industry because they don't necessarily trust that you'll make money, which statistics say otherwise, but it's kind of unusual for them. And then cash in retirement, basically give everything you have and hope.
Scary. Anybody else? Well, I'd like to thank my panelists then for a wonderful and entertaining evening so far. And we're certainly available to ask more questions too, that anybody wants to ask us one-on-one. So,
Just
and thank
three
you.
more thank yous before we
Oh,
wrap up.
Okay.
We'd like to thank Commotion and Zuni for helping us set up this lovely place. Can we have some applause for? And thank you to Life Science Washington for pairing up with us to hold this event. So thank you guys. And thank you to the Programs Committee for Women in Bio who helped the logistics and all the details to get this going. And finally, thank you to all of you for attending the event. We hope that if you're not already a member, you can become a member. And we still have about 30 minutes of networking and enjoy whatever the time can and does. And thank you.